So this is the meat of the episode. This is what we really
here we
want.
go.
This is what we want people
wind
to
up
know
now.
from this. Okay. So you ran for the Senate, you ran for the governorship. And you were a real conservative, and you had the Republican Party refusing to support you. What was going on with that? You had people like Howie Carr totally just slandering your character. So expose it. Like, what's going on? We don't want to attack anyone's character, but like, people need to know the truth.
Yeah.
What's going on?
So this is kind of where we need to put the needle back at the beginning of the record, where I was talking about, my background, and I told you I got to the part where I got in. I was elected in a long shot race. This is the part where I'll explain the history of where we're at now as a party and what it stands for and why a guy like me can't exist in their minds. And that is, I win this long shot race. The minority leader of the House, kind of recognizes me for winning that long shot race. That an important victory, I guess, in some people's minds. And so he put me on the Ways and Means Committee. So now the Ways and Means, as a freshman, as a first term state representative, and the Ways and Means Committee is where the entire budget's determined. And so you get a chance on the Ways and Means Committee to go. They have hearings all across the state, and you meet with every state agency. You meet with education, arts, and the cultural council, transportation divisions. I mean, you meet with everything. And so my experience on that finance committee back when I was just in Whitman on the finance committee, add a lot of zeros to the end of the budget for those things, and you start to look at what the state does. It's very much what the towns do, only on a much larger scale, and they have additional things that they do. We have a federal and state joint agency on immigration, for example, and one of the questions I asked way back when was, how many people do we have in the state illegally or undocumented at the time? About 300,000 is what they told me back in like 11 or 12. And I said, well, what's your budget? With your budget, how many people can you process every year? Oh, we can process about 1,500 people a year. And I was like, what? 1,500 people a year is what the federal and state agency of Massachusetts can process. Right? We have this huge I'm going to skip the bigger story for a second, just to go back to immigration, because this just blows my mind. We've created an artificial backlog in every state so that people are kept undocumented and illegal and working under the table for a reason. And it's a reason that again, unholy alliance between, let's call it Democrats and Republicans, but let's call it something else too. The people who live in urban centers, the politicians that benefit from the vote of all those people.
The swamp.
Yeah, but the politicians that benefit directly from all those people working and depending on state services, aid for housing, aid for food, all that stuff. Those people, they vote Democrat because the Democrats tell them to vote that way, but they have to vote that way because they're not making enough money and they need those services. And at the same time, let's call them Republican supporters, right? These big industries and stuff, the hospitality industries, hotels, restaurants, they all benefit from people working under the table, twice the hours, half the rate. So through chambers of commerce, they make sure they support Republicans that will also allow this system to remain broken, right? They keep the immigration system broken on purpose, and it creates a permanent underclass of people that will always be, working low-wage jobs for them. And that's what, again, to fast forward to today, that's what we're seeing is an infusion of people that are going to come in and continue to be that new wave of low-wage workers for a country that, seems to be turning into more of a service industry country than anything else. A lot of our manufacturing now is overseas, even just right over the border to Mexico. If big automakers can get it done cheaper, they'll outsource it right to Mexico. And that's a sad state for our country and for our unions, to be quite honest. But anyway, back to the needle being back to the early part of the record. I get in, I get on the Ways and Means Committee, tremendous honor, great opportunity for me to really learn a lot. I get picked as an emerging leader by this national organization. I go down to the University of Virginia Darden School of Business, and I meet with 49 other legislators from, freshman legislators from around the country. People like, there's this guy, a mayor of Dallas now, Eric, I can't think of his last name right now, but Eric he was a Democrat, but he just switched to Republican about I know we need a fact checker that's on the sidelines to help me out.
Little producer
I'll
here.
think of his name as soon as we're off
We don't
the
have
air.
that money yet.
He's a great guy. Anyway, he was Democrat and he
We'll
switched
put his
to
name up
Republican.
We'll put his name up.
And but also Nicole Maliotakis, who's a congresswoman out of Staten Island. The New York, another congressman that ran for governor, Lee Zeldin. He was in my class as well. So I got to know a lot of these great kind of up and coming leaders. You know, in 2011 when we did this program, 8, 10, 12 years later, a lot of them ended up running for pretty significant offices. And, I just happened to be along with them on the ride, running for U.S. Senate and governor. But there was a reason we were picked as emerging leaders, is because I think they saw that group of people as like change agents for the future in government. And so we got to be part of that program. I thought it was fantastic. But one of the things that was really sad was like right in Massachusetts, and again, I know we have a lot of time in this thing. I don't want to bore the people on the podcast for too much, but prior to me getting elected, there was a problem where you probably heard of patronage or graft or whatever it is. What happens is if you support a politician, they get a job, right, in something in state government. It was notorious under Billy Bulger. If you held signs for him or donated to his campaign or people that he was aligned with, he would get you a job at the MBTA. So they used to call it there was a nickname for it. Anyway, patronage is like as old as time. In fact, if you watch the movie Lincoln about passing the 16th Amendment, they show how they basically bartered some jobs, to congressmen for the vote, to make sure they got the vote. So it's been around. It's nothing new, but to the point where it gets to be excessive. That's when I think government watchdog agencies and even regulators or Department of Justice or in this state, the Attorney General in Massachusetts, they start to look at this and go, this is too much. And so there's this thing called the Ware Report that came out, and it explained how many, it had a whole list of people that received jobs, and it tied them to all these politicians that they had helped. And then, it basically exposed the whole corruption of what was going on. And so of course, the legislature says, we promise to do sweeping reform. We're going to make sure this never happens again. Sweeping reform. Just so you know, if anybody's watching, if you hear that there's sweeping reform,
nothing happened.
It means that they're just trying to sweep it under the rug. Yeah. That's really what it's all about. So the sweeping reform was that they were going to stop legislators from being able to make a phone call and make a recommendation to somebody that shouldn't be qualified for the job. And so you were no longer going to be able to make that phone call. And if you did want to recommend somebody, it had to be in writing. A politician would have to put the recommendation letter in writing, and the person had to already be a semifinalist, like basically one of the last few people being considered for the job. Well, the bill hits the House on a Wednesday. We usually voted on Wednesdays, and we passed the bill with a reform in it. And then the minority leader says to all of us Republicans, this is going to pass through. It's going to go to the Senate. They have a chance to modify the bill. If there's any major changes or anything that's going to concerning, I'll let you know. Otherwise, the Senate version comes back to the House and it gets voted on one more time, and then it's passed or sent on to the governor. So we're promised that on Thursday, if there's no problems, we'll just let it go through informal session. Informal session means that we don't get called in. Like, we don't bring in all 160 legislators from around the state, that we just agree that if nothing changed from Wednesday, they'll let it go.
Okay.
So I go to the State House on Thursday. I'm up there for business anyway, and I see the email come in with the final version from the Senate, and I see that they've taken out the accountability. No phone call thing, nothing in writing. And I went, we just basically, the whole bill that was supposed to be reform is no reform. It's just a joke. Yeah. And so I knew that one thing you could do is basically one person during an informal session can block passage of the thing. You just doubt the quorum, and that means nobody's there, and that means they have to put it through the next time the full body's there. So, if they want to pass it, I want to make sure there's a roll call to show who was actually going to pass this piece of junk, right? Mm-hmm. So I run into the chamber, and I come through one entrance, and then through another entrance, I see Jim Lyons. Now, Jim and I were friends now, but at the time we didn't really know each other. He was from Andover. I'm from the South Shore. And we come running in, and another guy, Dan Webster, he's from Hanson. He came in. All three of us had looked at our emails and seen this bill and said, wait a minute, they stripped out the reform. Yeah. Like, what's going on? I get grabbed by an assistant policy person from my own Republican, minority leader's office, and she tells me, if you try to block this bill, you will never get another piece of legislation passed the entire time you're here on Beacon Hill.
A Republican
tells me that. So to my shame, great shame, that was the one and only time I did not vote on a bill or did not block a bill that I should have blocked based on principle. I just
Wow.
it was that moment of going, what do I do? What do I do?
Yeah.
And all three of us basically they gave us all the same threats, and we just like, okay, it's just my acclamation to Beacon Hill and what was really going on. Now there's a red flag over my head that I don't even see, but the sort of establishment group of Republicans that have
So this is when it
power.
starts.
That's where it starts. Where
This
you start
is
to
when your
get that
name came up on their desk.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. And the radar in my mind goes up. Oh boy.
Okay.
So the leadership in the minority leader's office, the Republican minority leader's office, they started to kind of question my loyalty to what they were doing, and I was like, well. And somebody even said to me once, well, you're supposed to vote the way your boss tells you. I said, the minority leader is not my boss. I was elected by 40,000 people to get.
Those people are my boss.
They're my boss,
Yeah.
right? Like I'll vote for the leadership team, but I don't take orders from them. Like that was kind of how I viewed it.
Yeah.
They don't view it that way up there in Beacon Hill. There is a pecking order, and you wait your turn, and your turn may be 20, 30 years from now, and they don't mind. You can sit in your desk and be quiet and go along with them. And as long as you go along to get along for as long as possible, they may reward you with one thing in your town that you need someday down the road. But that's not what I was there for. I was 40 years old. I was a business owner looking to try to make a change, try to be more representative of what was going on. And so at that point, I was like, okay, now I need to really keep my radar up on what's going on up here. And it was after that, like I said, they started to question what I was doing. In 2013, Deihl Patrick, his governor's administration, passed the largest tax increase package that was ever presented to the legislature. It was about a $3 billion increase at the time to the state budget.
Who was this?
Deihl Patrick. Yeah, he preceded
Democrat?
Sorry, he preceded Charlie Baker.
Okay.
And Charlie ran against him in 2010 and lost. So the year that I won, Charlie lost that race for governor, but Charlie won in 14. One of the things that we had for an issue for him in 14 was to repeal the indexing of the state's gas tax to inflation, which was part of this $3 billion package. Now, think about the fact that this would be the only tax in Massachusetts. This is part of this $3 billion thing. Your gas tax would go up every year tied to inflation, consumer price index, basically the inflation number every year. It would go up by that rate. And so the state would always be able to have an ever-increasing percentage of revenue for transportation from that gas tax, right? The tradition in Massachusetts is if you want to pass a tax or increase a tax, you take a representative vote, right? The legislature, you take that vote, you do a roll call, and you're on record that you voted to increase taxes. That way, the voters know you raised my taxes.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to say, well, there's potholes everywhere, I had to do it, then maybe your town says or city says, yeah, okay, that was fine, I get it. You had to do it.
Yeah.
However, our whole government has been set up on no taxation without representation. And when you take away that representative vote, it's all gone. Because 20 years from now, if our gas tax was indexed to go up with inflation, nobody would say, why does my gas tax keep going up every year? People would say, oh, it's just set to do that. Why is it? Because 20 years ago, the legislature said they don't want to they're too afraid to take roll calls on this anymore, right? That's baloney.